Some mistakes don't ruin a career. They wake up the entire government. The sound was almost too ordinary to matter. A single sheet of paper tore cleanly down the middle, its sharp rip echoing through the front lobby of the Jefferson County Police Precinct just after 8:15 on a gray Tuesday morning. Conversation stopped for only a heartbeat before uniforms returned to their routines. Keyboards clicked again, phones rang, and coffee cups lifted as if nothing important had happened. Officer Daniel Brooks stood behind the front desk with a smug smile, letting the two torn pieces drift into a nearby trash can. Across from him, Monica Hayes remained perfectly still. She was a black woman in her late 30s, dressed in a navy blazer over a simple white blouse, carrying herself with the quiet confidence of someone who never needed to raise her voice to be heard. She didn't argue. She didn't flinch. She didn't even glance toward the trash can where the shredded document now rested beneath discarded paperwork and a crumpled coffee sleeve. Instead, she looked directly at Daniel with calm eyes that revealed nothing. To everyone watching, she looked like another citizen who had just lost an argument with a police officer. A few deputies standing nearby exchanged knowing smiles. One quietly shook his head as if to say she should have known better. Another leaned against the counter, amused by the silence that followed. Daniel folded his arms across his chest and spoke loudly enough for half the lobby to hear. If you walk into my precinct waving papers and expecting special treatment, you're in the wrong place. Monica answered with a voice so steady it barely rose above the hum of fluorescent lights. That document wasn't yours to destroy. Daniel laughed under his breath. Looks like it isn't anybody's now. A couple of people waiting on metal benches glanced over before returning to their phones. No one stepped in. No one asked what had been written on the paper. No one questioned why its envelope had carried a bold federal seal across the front before it was opened. Somewhere deeper inside the building, a printer suddenly stopped mid-page. A dispatcher frowned at her. Monitor as a secure connection unexpectedly disappeared. Down the hallway, a patrol officer lifted his portable radio, confused by a burst of static that interrupted routine traffic for less than 2 seconds. Tiny moments. Easy to ignore. Easy to dismiss. Monica noticed every one of them. She slowly adjusted the leather strap of the briefcase resting beside her feet and took one measured breath. There was no anger on her face. No fear. Only patience. The kind of patience that comes from knowing events have already moved beyond anyone's ability to stop them. Daniel mistook that silence for defeat. He had no idea that the piece of paper lying in the trash had never been the real source of authority. And he certainly had no idea that somewhere beyond the walls of the precinct, engines had already started, radios had already changed channels, and a response had already been set into motion long before his hand ever reached for the document. The lobby settled into an uneasy rhythm that only government buildings seemed capable of creating, where ordinary conversations continued even when something important had shifted beneath the surface. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, reflecting across polished tile floors that had witnessed thousands of routine mornings. Yet this one carried a quiet tension that no one could quite explain. Monica Hayes remained beside the reception counter without asking another question or offering another explanation. She simply waited. Her composure puzzled a young records clerk named Emily Carter, who had been watching from behind a stack of case folders. Most people became frustrated after being dismissed. Some argued. Others demanded supervisors. Monica did none of those things. She glanced once at the wall clock, noted the passing seconds, and folded her hands calmly over the handle of her leather briefcase. Officer Daniel Brooks interpreted her silence as surrender. He straightened his uniform, greeted another deputy with an amused grin, and joked that some people believed official-looking paperwork could solve every problem. A few quiet laughs followed before everyone drifted back into their own responsibilities. Nobody noticed that the dispatcher had now attempted 3 times to reconnect a secure communications terminal without success. Each attempt ended with the same brief message before the screen went blank again. Down the hallway, Sergeant Michael Turner frowned as his department-issued tablet suddenly requested a fresh authentication that normally appeared only after scheduled federal audits. He dismissed it as another software issue and continued reviewing patrol assignments. Across the room, an evidence technician walked toward storage carrying sealed containers, only to discover that the electronic access panel required a temporary verification code it had never requested before. Small inconveniences appeared one after another, like distant clouds gathering beyond the horizon. None of them seemed connected. None of them seemed urgent. Yet Monica quietly observed every reaction without moving from her place. She was not studying the officers themselves. She was watching the building respond. The difference mattered. Daniel noticed her expression and shook his head with another confident smile. "You are still here?" he asked. Monica answered without changing her calm tone. "Yes." Nothing more. No accusation. No warning. No emotion that anyone could easily read. The simplicity of her answer unsettled Daniel more than he cared to admit, although he quickly pushed the feeling aside. He had spent nearly 12 years believing confidence could solve almost any confrontation. Experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and his instincts insisted that the woman standing before him had already lost whatever argument she thought she could win. Meanwhile, outside the precinct, morning traffic rolled steadily along Main Street as delivery trucks, school buses, and commuters followed their familiar routes beneath a sky of low gray clouds. A man walking his dog paused briefly near the front entrance after noticing two identical black sport utility vehicles turning onto the block several hundred feet apart. They maintained a careful distance between one another, neither speeding nor attracting attention. To anyone passing by, they looked like ordinary government vehicles completing another routine assignment. Inside the station, nobody looked through the front windows. Nobody realized that somewhere beyond the parking lot, invisible decisions had already been made by people whose authority extended far beyond the walls of the precinct, and the countdown that had quietly begun with the sound of tearing paper continued moving forward one silent second at a time. The first person to notice that something was wrong was not a detective, a captain, or even Officer Daniel Brooks. It was Officer Ethan Collins, the newest deputy assigned to the morning shift. Fresh out of the academy less than a year earlier, Ethan had developed a habit that older officers quietly teased him about. He paid attention to details. While carrying a stack of incident reports toward the records office, he glanced at the trash container beside the reception desk. Two torn pieces of heavy cream-colored paper had slipped onto the floor after someone tossed another file into the bin. He bent down, intending to throw them away, but a faint blue seal caught his attention. It was unlike anything he had seen on ordinary county paperwork. He carefully turned over one fragment and recognized only a few surviving words. United States. Marshals. Sealed. Before he could fit the remaining pieces together, Daniel casually walked past and nudged the scraps deeper into the trash with the side of his shoe. "Do not waste your morning cleaning up garbage," Daniel said with an easy smile. Ethan hesitated. "Sir, this looks official." Daniel shrugged without slowing his pace. "Not anymore." Several nearby deputies laughed softly before returning to their conversations. Ethan forced a polite smile, but something about the exchange refused to leave his mind. During training, instructors had repeatedly emphasized one principle. Federal documents followed procedures that local departments were expected to respect, even when officers disagreed with their contents. He looked toward Monica Hayes. She remained exactly where she had been standing, neither impatient nor nervous. Her attention drifted briefly toward the large glass entrance before returning to the wall clock. She appeared to be measuring time instead of waiting for permission. That quiet confidence unsettled Ethan more than any raised voice could have. Most people facing embarrassment tried to defend themselves. Monica did not. She behaved like someone who already knew the outcome and understood there was no reason to argue with the present because the future was already on its way. The atmosphere inside the precinct slowly became more unusual. A detective attempting to access archived case files received a temporary restriction notice requiring outside authorization. Dispatched supervisors exchanged puzzled looks after receiving an automated advisory instructing them not to disconnect secure communication channels under any circumstances. Even the building maintenance manager complained that several electronic doors had entered a controlled security mode without warning. None of the systems completely failed. They simply behaved differently, as though quietly preparing for something no one inside had anticipated. Daniel dismissed every inconvenience with growing irritation, blaming outdated equipment and government software. His confidence remained untouched. "Nothing works the way it should around here," he muttered as he signed another report. Monica finally spoke again, her voice calm enough to disappear beneath the soft buzz of fluorescent lights. Sometimes systems change before people do. Daniel looked up, confused by the remark, but before he could answer, Ethan noticed movement beyond the front windows. More black sport utility vehicles had entered the parking lot, each stopping with remarkable precision. No emergency lights flashed. No sirens interrupted the morning. Yet every vehicle parked as though following a plan written long before anyone inside had realized there was a plan at all. Ethan felt an unfamiliar weight settle in his chest. Whatever was about to happen had nothing to do with routine police work anymore. And for the first time that morning, he wondered whether the quiet woman standing only a few feet away had never been the one expected to answer questions. The lobby door slid open with a soft mechanical sound that barely drew attention from anyone inside. Visitors came and went every day, and nobody expected this moment to be any different. The first two people who entered wore plain dark jackets over business attire and carried small identification wallets clipped to their belts. They did not speak to the receptionist. They did not glance around the room with curiosity. Instead, they quietly observed every face, every hallway, every security camera, as though comparing reality with information they already possessed. A few seconds later, two more individuals entered, followed by another pair. Their movements were calm, disciplined, and almost invisible to anyone who was not paying close attention. Officer Ethan Collins watched them from across the lobby, and a strange feeling settled in his stomach. None of them looked hurried. None of them behaved like people responding to an emergency. They acted like professionals arriving exactly when they expected to arrive. Daniel Brooks noticed them only after one of the visitors politely asked, "Who is the officer assigned to the front reception area this morning?" Daniel stepped forward with the same confidence he had carried all morning. "That would be me. Can I help you?" The visitor offered a courteous smile that revealed nothing. "We will speak with you shortly." Daniel frowned slightly. "About what?" "You will be informed at the appropriate time." The answer sounded polite, yet strangely final. Before Daniel could press further, Monica Hayes quietly lifted her briefcase from the floor. She did not wave. She did not call out to the newcomers. She simply acknowledged their presence with a slight nod that lasted less than a second. Ethan noticed it immediately. It was not the greeting of strangers. It was the silent recognition of people who already understood one another's roles. Daniel completely missed it. His attention shifted toward another deputy who had just mentioned that several department computers had automatically entered restricted access mode. "This place is falling apart today," Daniel muttered with growing frustration. "Nothing is working." Monica looked toward the large front windows where more identical government vehicles had now parked in careful formation. The parking lot remained remarkably quiet. There were no flashing lights, no raised voices, no dramatic announcements. Yet employees inside neighboring offices had begun looking through their own windows, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. Even the morning traffic outside seemed to slow as passing drivers glanced toward the gathering vehicles before continuing on their way. Inside the precinct, conversations gradually faded until only the faint hum of fluorescent lights and distant telephone rings filled the air. The ordinary rhythm that had defined the morning quietly disappeared, replaced by an uneasy silence that nobody could explain. Ethan looked once more toward the trash container beside the reception desk, remembering the torn federal seal buried beneath discarded paperwork. He suddenly understood that the document itself had never been the real story. It had simply been the first domino. Whatever had been set in motion no longer depended on paper. It depended on procedure. It depended on authority. And judging by the calm expressions of the people who had just arrived, every step that followed had already been carefully planned long before anyone inside the building realized they had become part of it. Daniel Brooks had spent enough years wearing a badge to believe he could recognize confidence when he saw it. In his experience, people who remained quiet after being challenged usually accepted defeat. That assumption had guided countless conversations throughout his career, and standing only a few feet away from Monica Hayes, he reached the same conclusion once again. He folded another report, placed it neatly on the reception counter, and looked directly at her. "If you are waiting for someone to fix this misunderstanding, you are wasting your time." Monica met his eyes with the same calm expression she had carried since walking through the front entrance. "I am not waiting for anyone to fix it," she replied. "It is already being handled." Her answer lingered in the silence that followed. Daniel gave a brief laugh, convinced she was trying to sound important. Around the lobby, a few deputies exchanged uncertain glances. The confidence they had shared only minutes earlier had begun to fade beneath a growing collection of strange events that no one could explain. Every secure computer terminal remained locked behind temporary federal authorization notices. The communications console continued displaying connection requests that dispatch supervisors had never seen before. Even routine outgoing calls now paused for several seconds before connecting. Sergeant Michael Turner walked toward the front desk carrying a tablet in his hand. "Daniel, have you noticed this?" he asked quietly. The screen displayed a department-wide advisory stating that all electronic records were entering preservation status until further notice. Daniel frowned. Probably another software update. Michael looked unconvinced. Updates do not usually freeze evidence logs and visitor records at the same time. Before Daniel could answer, one of the plainclothes visitors calmly approached the reception counter again. He checked his watch, then spoke into a small communications device clipped discreetly beneath his jacket. His words were so soft that nobody nearby could hear them. But almost immediately, another black sport utility vehicle rolled slowly into the parking lot outside. Then another. Ethan Collins instinctively stepped closer to the front windows. The vehicles formed an orderly line without blocking traffic or drawing unnecessary attention. Every driver remained inside. Every passenger waited. No one appeared impatient. The entire scene carried the unmistakable precision of people following instructions that required no discussion. Monica quietly observed the same view before returning her attention to the lobby. She still had not raised her voice. She still had not demanded an apology. Her composure had become impossible to ignore. Daniel noticed it too, although he interpreted it as stubbornness rather than certainty. "You seem remarkably calm," he said. Monica answered with a faint smile that revealed neither satisfaction nor anger. "Experience teaches you the value of patience." Those words settled over the room with unexpected weight. Ethan felt them more than he understood them. He glanced once more toward the trash container holding the torn federal document and suddenly realized that everyone inside the precinct had been focused on the wrong question. They had spent the morning asking who Monica Hayes was. The better question was why someone carrying a sealed federal document had arrived at this building in the first place. Before anyone could voice that thought aloud, every radio inside the precinct emitted the same brief electronic tone at exactly the same moment. The sound lasted only a second, but it transformed the atmosphere completely. Conversations stopped. Phones fell silent. Even Daniel instinctively looked toward the ceiling as if expecting an explanation to arrive from somewhere above. None came. Outside, another vehicle door quietly opened, and for the first time that morning, it became clear that whatever had been approaching the precinct had finally arrived. The front entrance opened once again, but this time every conversation inside the precinct came to an immediate stop without anyone asking for silence. 6 men and women entered together with measured, unhurried steps, each wearing plain business attire beneath dark jackets that carried no visible insignia from a distance. Their movements were synchronized without appearing rehearsed, and each person seemed to know exactly where to stand before taking another step. The individual leading the group removed a leather credential wallet and presented it briefly to Sergeant Michael Turner. The gesture lasted only a second, yet Michael's expression changed almost instantly. His shoulders stiffened, and the confidence that had carried him through countless routine mornings quietly disappeared. He nodded once and stepped aside without asking another question. Daniel Brooks watched the exchange with growing irritation. "What is going on?" he asked, expecting a direct answer. Instead, the lead official spoke in a calm, professional voice. "This facility is now operating under temporary federal administrative authority. Please remain where you are while procedural verification is completed." The words echoed through the lobby with remarkable clarity. Nobody raised a voice. Nobody issued dramatic commands. Yet every deputy instinctively stopped moving. Dispatchers remained seated. Detectives lowered the folders they had been carrying. Even the citizens waiting on the metal benches quietly looked toward the entrance, sensing that the atmosphere had shifted in a way none of them had experienced before. Daniel forced a polite smile that barely concealed his frustration. "There must be some misunderstanding," he said. We were never notified about any federal inspection. The official looked at him with composed professionalism. Notification was not required. Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Ethan Collins noticed something even more surprising. Monica Hayes had not moved from her place near the reception desk. She did not approach the officials. She did not attempt to explain herself. Instead, one member of the federal team respectfully walked toward her and offered a slight nod before quietly saying, "Good morning, Ms. Hayes." She returned the greeting with the same calm tone she had maintained all morning. "Good morning." That simple exchange changed everything for Ethan. It was the first unmistakable sign that Monica was not an outsider caught in an unfortunate situation. She was someone these officials already knew. Around the room, puzzled expressions spread from one face to another. Deputies who had laughed earlier now exchanged uncertain glances, trying to understand what they had missed. The lead official accepted a sealed folder from another member of the team and carefully reviewed several pages before speaking again. "Before we proceed, all building access points will remain temporarily secured. This is a standard procedural safeguard." Almost on cue, everyone heard the quiet click of electronically controlled doors engaging throughout the precinct. There was no sense of panic, only unmistakable order. Outside, additional personnel calmly took positions near the entrances while remaining courteous to arriving visitors, directing them to wait without creating confusion. Through the front windows, Ethan counted more government vehicles than before, all parked with deliberate precision beneath the gray morning sky. Daniel slowly turned toward Monica, searching her face for answers that had not been there only minutes earlier. She met his gaze with the same steady composure she had shown from the beginning, as though every moment unfolding around them had simply arrived exactly when it was supposed to. And for the first time since the morning began, Daniel realized that he was no longer the person who understood what was happening inside his own precinct. No announcement was made to explain who Monica Hayes really was. There was no dramatic introduction, no raised voice demanding attention, and no effort to embarrass anyone standing in the lobby. The truth arrived the way genuine authority often does, quietly and with complete confidence. The lead federal official opened the sealed folder in his hands and verified several identification numbers before looking toward Monica. "Ms. Hayes, thank you for your patience. We are ready to continue the transfer process." She offered a slight nod. "Thank you. I appreciate your prompt response." Daniel Brooks stared at the exchange, unable to reconcile what he was hearing with the assumptions he had made less than an hour earlier. "Transfer process?" he asked. The official turned toward him with the same composed professionalism that had defined every word he had spoken since entering the building. "Yes, Officer Brooks. Ms. Hayes is the Senior Federal Operations Coordinator assigned to oversee the secure transfer of protected judicial materials between federal and local jurisdictions. The sealed document that was destroyed this morning was part of an active chain of custody protected under federal procedure." The words seemed to drain every remaining sound from the room. Ethan Collins felt his heartbeat quicken as the scattered pieces finally came together. The unusual computer restrictions, the secured communications, the synchronized arrival of federal personnel, and Monica's remarkable composure had never been separate events. They had all been connected from the very beginning. Daniel blinked several times before speaking again. "Nobody told us who she was." The official answered without hesitation. "Her assignment did not require prior public disclosure. Your department was expected to verify the documentation presented and follow established protocol." Daniel instinctively glanced toward the trash container where the torn pieces of the federal document still rested beneath discarded papers. For the first time that morning, he understood that destroying the document had never erased its authority. Every record already existed elsewhere. Every identification number had been logged. Every step of the transfer had been monitored long before Monica entered the precinct. She had never needed to defend herself because the process itself would do that for her. Monica finally looked toward Daniel, not with satisfaction or resentment, but with quiet sincerity. "The document represented more than paper," she said gently. "It represented trust between agencies that serve the same public." Her words landed with far greater weight than any accusation could have carried. Around the lobby, deputies lowered their eyes, each replaying the morning in silence. The jokes that had seemed harmless now echoed differently in their memories. Ethan noticed that no one was smiling anymore. The lead official carefully closed the folder and continued in the same measured tone. Our objective today is not confrontation. Our responsibility is to preserve the integrity of a protected federal process and determine exactly what occurred. No threats followed. No emotional speeches interrupted the moment. There was only procedure, steady and impartial. Through the front windows, the gray morning remained unchanged. Yet inside the precinct, everything felt different. Daniel slowly realized that he had judged Monica within seconds of seeing her, while the federal team had trusted her with responsibilities that crossed state lines and demanded the highest level of professional confidence. Standing only a few feet away, she looked exactly as she had when she first walked through the front door, calm, respectful, and unshaken, because the authority she carried had never depended on being recognized. It had always existed, whether anyone in the room believed it or not. The federal team moved with remarkable efficiency, not because anyone had ordered them to hurry, but because every person already understood the next step before it was spoken. One official quietly documented the condition of the reception area, while another requested access to the security recordings from the beginning of the morning. Sergeant Michael Turner cooperated immediately, directing the information technology staff to preserve every available file without alteration. The request was handled with complete professionalism, and within minutes multiple copies of the surveillance footage were being secured according to established procedure. Officer Ethan Collins watched carefully as the same trash container that had been ignored earlier became an item of interest. Wearing protective gloves, a federal evidence specialist carefully removed the torn pieces of the sealed document and placed them inside a transparent evidence sleeve. The fragments were treated with the same respect as if the document had remained intact. Daniel Brooks stood silently only a few feet away. For the first time since the morning had begun, he realized that destroying the paper had never erased the official record. Every page had been logged before it arrived. Every transfer had been documented. Every signature existed within a protected federal system that could not be changed by tearing a single sheet. The lead official calmly addressed the room. Effective immediately, all materials related to today's events will remain under preservation review until the administrative process is complete. We appreciate your cooperation. There was no accusation in his voice, only the steady confidence of someone carrying out established responsibilities. Several deputies quietly surrendered their body-worn camera recordings for duplication, while dispatch supervisors exported communication logs requested by the review team. Nobody argued. Nobody resisted. The atmosphere inside the precinct had transformed from uncertainty into quiet reflection. Daniel slowly removed the notebook from his uniform pocket and placed it on the reception counter without being asked. His confident posture from earlier had disappeared, replaced by the unmistakable expression of someone replaying every decision he had made throughout the morning. Across the room, Monica Hayes remained composed. She neither celebrated nor criticized what was unfolding around her. Instead, she thanked the records clerk for locating a visitor log and expressed appreciation to Sergeant Turner for his department's cooperation with the preservation process. Her courtesy surprised several deputies who had expected resentment. Ethan noticed that every interaction she had was respectful, even after everything that had happened. That quiet professionalism spoke louder than any speech could have. One of the federal officials then approached Daniel with a standard administrative notice explaining that the incident would undergo formal review through the appropriate channels and that all relevant records would remain protected while the facts were evaluated. Daniel accepted the document without interruption. He read each line carefully before lowering his eyes for several long seconds. Outside, the black government vehicles remained parked exactly where they had stopped, their presence no longer mysterious but reassuring, representing order rather than intimidation. Inside, conversations resumed slowly, though they sounded different now, quieter and more thoughtful than before. Ethan looked once more toward Monica and understood the lesson that no training manual had ever fully explained. Real authority did not announce itself through volume, status, or appearances. It revealed itself through discipline, patience, and unwavering respect for the law. As the federal team completed the final preservation steps, and prepared the necessary documentation for the administrative review. The entire precinct stood as a silent reminder that trust between agencies depended not on assumptions about people, but on faithfully honoring the procedures designed to protect justice for everyone. By early afternoon, the gray clouds that had covered Jefferson County finally began to break, allowing narrow beams of sunlight to fall across the front steps of the precinct. One by one, the federal personnel completed their documentation, confirmed their records, and quietly prepared to leave. There had been no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, and no public spectacle. Every action had followed the same principle that had guided the entire morning. Facts would speak for themselves. Monica Hayes accepted a replacement copy of the protected transfer documentation from the lead federal official, who verified the chain of custody before placing the sealed folder into her leather briefcase. "Everything has been restored," he said. Monica thanked him with a warm but professional smile. "I appreciate everyone's commitment to doing this the right way." She then turned towards Sergeant Michael Turner. "Thank you for your cooperation once the situation became clear." Michael nodded respectfully. "We will learn from today." Those simple words carried more meaning than a lengthy apology ever could. Daniel Brooks remained near the reception desk, watching the final steps unfold in silence. The confidence that had defined his morning had been replaced by thoughtful reflection. As Monica walked toward the exit, Daniel spoke for the first time in several minutes. "Ms. Hayes." She stopped and turned toward him. "Yes, Officer Brooks." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I should have listened before making assumptions. I understand that now." Monica studied his expression for a brief moment before answering. "Respect is never delayed by asking one more question. It is delayed only by believing we already know the answer." Daniel slowly nodded. There was nothing left to argue, because the lesson no longer belonged to paperwork or procedure. It belonged to judgment. Ethan Collins stood quietly nearby, knowing he would remember that sentence long after every official report had been filed away. Throughout his career, he would likely respond to thousands of calls, review countless documents, and meet people from every possible background. Yet he understood that the most important decision would often come before any investigation even began. It would be the choice to treat every person with patience before reaching a conclusion. Monica stepped through the front doors as the cool afternoon breeze gently moved across the parking lot. The black government. Vehicles departed as calmly as they had arrived, disappearing into ordinary traffic until they became impossible to distinguish from every other vehicle on the road. Within minutes, the precinct slowly returned to its familiar routine. Telephones rang again. Computers resumed normal operation. Deputies returned to their assignments. From the outside, the building looked exactly as it had at the beginning of the day. Only the people inside had changed. Ethan glanced once at the empty reception area where a torn piece of paper had started everything and realized that justice had never needed anger to prove its strength. It required patience, integrity, and the courage to let truth arrive in its own time. And perhaps that was the quiet lesson every badge should carry, because authority can open a door, but character determines what happens after it does. The law is strongest when it is guided by humility, and the people who honor it without prejudice become its greatest guardians. On that ordinary Tuesday morning, nobody witnessed a victory over another person. They witnessed something far more lasting. They witnessed assumptions giving way to truth, and truth reminding everyone that genuine justice recognizes neither appearance nor status. It recognizes only integrity.